Good evening. Thanks, IAM members, for joining the session. That on a Saturday. Sorry for the Saturday session, but it's important topic, so I thought we could do it on at the earliest. So I have a set of esteemed panelists today. We have Karthik, we have Aniket, and Ramachandran. Thanks for joining in. And from the IA Madras chapter side, welcome to all. And it's a eminent chapter with a lot of events activities. And first of the few sessions, which is on the hot topic on RBI Master Direction on Information Technology, ITGC, and controls and practices. We picked on this topic one or two reasons where a lot of discussions are going on. This circular was issued a year ago, and it has now picked up a lot of momentum. And when the circular got released on November 7th, a lot of discussions have happened. So before I take too much of my time, we have 2 hours to discuss, but there are a lot of other topics, interesting topics within the circle. Yeah, sorry guys, I think I lost you somewhere. Is that okay right now, Aniket, Karthik?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know where I left. Aniket should go ahead. Introductions, Karthik from Risk Advisory, Aniket ED, and I have Raman Narasimhan, CRO professional from industry. Aniket, all yours. You can go ahead with the session. Any questions, please feel free to put it on chat. Happy to take questions. We have about 15 minutes then to take more questions because a lot of points to discuss. And this is a very recent circular, so there will be a lot of questions. So if the time permits, we will stretch it by another 10-15 minutes. But then if there are more questions, happy to have one more session. Please, and this is under recording, so you can see it on the website as soon as it gets completed. Thank you. All yours, Aniket and Karthik and Ram. Sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So these days, cybersecurity plays a pivotal role in establishing trust in digital interactions. Robust security measures protect sensitive information, privacy, and confidentiality. Sorry, someone raised his hand. So, Swami, is there any question?
You can put, Swami has raised his hand.
Yeah. All right. I mean,
yeah, go ahead, Aniket. It's okay.
Sure. So by safeguarding data from unauthorized access, manipulation, or theft, cybersecurity fosters confidence among users, customers, and other stakeholders. Trust is further bolstered through transparent communication about security practices, compliance with industry standards, and commitment to addressing emerging threats. In fact, you must have come across a news of recent issue at one of the large public sector bank. The fraudsters noticed an issue related to IMPS transactions. Just in a span of 4 days, and those 4 days were those were Diwali days. Actually, it started on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So just in a span of 4 days, fraudulent transactions worth rupees 820 crores were carried out, mostly from 2 cities. And it was detected on time, and luckily bank could recover around 90% of the money. So we regularly come across many such issues. As more and more people adopting digital means to perform transactions, the cyber frauds have also become common. The fraudsters are finding innovative means to con their praise. A few examples could be, money for task scams or sextortion, electricity bill payment frauds. So the list is endless. These rising frauds have forced Finance Ministry to take a serious notice as well. In fact, there is a news in today's paper that the Finance Ministry and the Parliamentary Panel on ICT have finally decided to look into and tackle the matter. So in order to provide a safe and secure environment, banks, NBFCs are in constant endeavor to implement new technologies, processes. In essence, cybersecurity forms a foundation for a trustworthy digital environment, vital for integrity and reliability of online transactions and communications. So if you look at the evolution of RBI circular on information security and cyber security, it reflects the dynamic nature of digital landscape in this sector. RBI has consistently issued guidelines to enhance resilience of financial institutes against ever-evolving cyber threats. These circulars typically cover areas such as governance, risk management, adoption of robust cybersecurity framework, incident reporting, business continuity, regular audits, etc. And staying updated with the latest circular is crucial for regulated entities in the financial sector to maintain a proactive approach towards cybersecurity. So today we are here to present our point of view on recent master direction on information technology, risk controls, and assurance practices. We can go to the next slide. Slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Yeah. So today we are here to sorry. So these draft master direction was published in October 2022 for seeking public comments. Based on the feedback received, the final master direction in information technology risk control and assurance practices was released on 7th November 2023. Going forward, the master direction would be a single point reference as RBI has consolidated two circulars, one on having a standardized checklist for conducting computer audit. The name itself suggests that it was an old circular. It was released in the year 2002. The second circular is on technology working group on information security, electronic banking technology, risk management, and cyber frauds. It was released in 2011, and it's a quite comprehensive circular. It's almost 174-page circular. So these two circulars, RBI now has consolidated. Further, they have also repelled 12 circulars going forward, out of which 11 circulars were specific to scheduled commercial banks. And going forward, NBFCs will have to follow these master directions as 2017 circular, the master direction on information technology framework for NBFC sector now stands repealed. The interesting part is now this master direction along with banks will be applicable to banks, of course applicable to banks, but are now also applicable to NBFCs, credit information companies, and all India financial institutes such as Exim Bank, NABARD, NAPFED, NHB, and SDB. So this is going to be a kind of unified framework going forward. So these directions shall come into effect from 1st April 2024. Till then, the other circulars mentioned in annexures will continue to remain force till 31st March 2024. Also, there are some exceptions here. From NBFC's point of view, the directions are applicable to top layer, upper layer, and middle layer NBFCs. Further, these directions are not applicable to local area banks. There are very few banks, few local area banks we have, and NBFCs, core investment companies. And also, there are some relaxations for foreign banks operating in India through a branch mode. We can go to next slide. Saravanan, we can.
Let me try to add, Aniket, couple of points. One, this not just like a checklist or 25-page kind of complaints requirement. It covers a lot, and like what he mentioned, Aniket mentioned, and Karthik also going to cover later. This is a very key governance, risk, and compliance requirement. It covers basically like strategic alignment, risk management, and BCM, and so on. There are so many chapters they will be looking at. And I would also, stress upon something like, this advancement of risk and compliance. Normally, all of us, at some level, we would have policies, processes, everything. But is this enough? I think with this 25 page, whatever, 25 or whatever number, it is as good like, maybe 100 or 200 pages of whatever complaints requirement. It is put in nutshell, well drafted. At the same time, there are a lot of value add, like what Aniket was talking about. There could be a kind of, exploitation on control weakness, control adequacy, or, how we look at governance, how we look at risk management, how we look at the end of the day, that kind of compliance required, and the stakeholder confidence, the value add. This is important. I would request all of you, probably I'm pretty sure Mr. Ravi and his team, they are going to cover all this. Over to you again, Aniket.
Yeah. So thanks, Raman. So then we can go to next slide, please. Yeah. So these master directions are structured in 5 main domains. It follows a top-down approach for security. Starts with IT governance, wherein the requirements for setting up the governance framework are clearly prescribed. Then it talks about IT infrastructure and service management. Then IT and information security, risk management, business continuity and disaster recovery, and finally, information systems audit. Yeah, next slide, please. So under IT governance, as a part of IT governance, RBI has prescribed the requirements to have a framework for, say, policies, processes, and controls that organizations need to implement to ensure their IT systems effectively support and contribute to achieve business goals. It includes decision-making structure, accountability mechanism, terms of reference for IT strategy and IT steering committee. It has also clearly prescribed the role of board, right? I mean, what should be the board's role in terms of having a robust IT governance framework for the organization. So the similar requirements were prescribed in NBFC circular as well. However, in this master direction, the requirements are much more in detail. So in the NBFC's master direction circular, the requirements were briefly mentioned. So herein, the requirements now are quite detailed in nature. I will hand it over to Karthik. Karthik will take you through the rest of the domains. Karthik.
Yep. So thanks, Aniket. So hi everyone, a very good evening, and really happy to be part of this IAS session once again. So this is again, kind of a series of, I would say, a decoding more in terms of, what an NBFC should be looking at. Now, I believe, all of us on this call today, would be really aware how the internal controls, evolved, right? See, the basic component of the risk management, right? First will be identifying the risk that entity, it has been exposed to. And the second leg is obviously, assessing their magnitude and then monitoring them. Monitoring, again, it's not like we're not doing it once, right? It's going to be a periodic monitoring of, the risk and, what is their impact that they're going to have in the organization, and then controlling them or mitigating them, right? So there is a variety of procedures and, which, the management would be setting aside, to ensure that the losses are being, or rather the potential losses are being reduced. Now, keeping that in the mind, again, if you really look into the amount of, regulation coming out, the regulatory guidance coming out, and also in terms of, the globalization of, the cloud today, and also the IT services being provided right across from the globe to the, banks and also to the NBFCs today. So there also, the risk is also, kind of, it's increased. If you're gonna put all of it under one specific team, or one specific, there's CRO, or the CISO, I don't think it's gonna help to that extent. So there's a lot of the inputs are required. A lot of decision making is required in today's world. A lot of the monitoring checks are also is required, because of especially because of the sophisticated financial technology which are being used by the NBFCs and the bank, right from the decision making process until the loans are being rendered, the payment gateway. So it is all, it's an extended leg of, I would rather say, the operational risk. While operational risk has been looked at from the board and looked at from the the management, now this IT also is probably now been carved out separately, because of the huge impact that technology is playing around in an organization. So thereby there is a need at the board level for them to really assess in terms of what are the various risks that an organization has been exposed to, and thereby what are the strategic direction that the organization should really fall under, and thereby they're also ensuring that the risk is also under the control. So the IT governance overall framework, if you really talk about, it is not something is restricted only from a risk perspective, right? So it also requires right from the strategic alignment, value delivery, risk management, resource management, and performance. So resource management again is a very key element. I hope most of you on the call also would would have heard about, or rather, there's a huge pressure to do a cost cut on the IT side, right? But then, is it so much of the third party contractors required? What is the resource strategy required? Resource is not always a constant, right? So, is there a proper skilled resource to deliver the value? Are people equipped to deliver it, or do we need to invest in the more strategy? So, right to that extent is also the IT governance really required to be looked at, and also again on the performance, right? So now you invested, and you also have to look at the performance part of it. So right across the right from the strategic alignment of every IT activity and the value what it delivers, and right from the performance of the people, and also in terms of the returns what you're getting. So the overall IT governance is something, including the risk management, is something which they're also trying to emphasize upon. Now, again, it also talks more at the policy procedure level, which, it also talks about. So typically today, what happens, in my experience, I'm talking about, which probably, Raman sir can also add, or Aniket can add. So most of the policy procedure at times, talk at very high level. Now, this particular framework has really talked about to state that, the policy procedure should also include the guidelines and the standards what is required to be put in place, rather what is required to be implemented, and the detailed procedure. The detail is very important today. Now most of the procedures today talk about at a very very high level. It doesn't talk about in detail what a person has to do. So they're clearly calling it out, a detailed procedures are required to be put forth. Now again, I think Aniket would have spoken about the IT strategy committee. So even most of our clients, when we go to the principle, the point that comes out is that, whether the certain decisions, at the board level can be taken, because one is, of the technical, the understanding of it, and whether, board really want to, go about to understand, technical direction, what, the organization should take about. So thereby, the framework clearly outlines that there's going to be an IT strategy committee, and an IT strategy committee, one person should have a really an understanding of the technical aspects, and also to guide the management in terms of the technology initiatives, what they need to look at. That is again one of the very key aspect, because they need to support to the board in terms of what is required, and out of which one should be an independent director. Then again, I think all of us would have a steering committee, and steering committee would ensure the risk management of it, IT awareness, and the capacity management. I'm going to talk about all of this in length, but I'm just trying to give an the outline of the IT governance that we are talking about. And head of IT operations, or rather say IT function, I would say IT operation, he is going to be a first line of defense to ensure that he is also responsible to implement all the IT projects. He is also responsible to ensure that the objectives are being implemented, and thereby is also responsible to ensure that all the controls are operating as designed, and other the proper the periodic assessment of controls operating as is required to meet the objective also falls under his responsibility. So they're clearly called out as first line of defense, that IT head of IT operations would be wearing the hat. Maybe so I'm going to talk about a bit more in detail. Also I'm going to share most of my experiences, what I faced in most of my audits, or my advisory that I've done to many of the clients. And I'm feel free to stop me or share your views wherever that you want to share. Please feel free to do that. Next slide, please. Yeah.
I think there are some questions on the chat box. You want to take it now or later? Or Raman? Or Karthik, you want to take that question? You want to read it for you?
Ravi, I would take it. I would call, first of all, risk assessment. It should be start with the risk owner, that is the IT team or pillar one you call, and the risk management team can provide expertise, can help them monitor, along with audit, that is the pillar three, and they can look at even the residual risk, the kind of compliance where they need to go strongly, depending on again the kind of control issues or where they find something they need to strengthen, right? This is what I would address, like the effectiveness of the control or the kind of compliance requirement, all depending on, first, as a owner or looking into governance piece, do you perceive the risk properly? If you don't know how to perceive the risk, then how you can map the controls? You would not know whether are you managing your responsibility, accountability, right? That's the way I look at it. Karthik, over to you
I
if
am
you
going
have
to talk
anything.
about this risk management in detail. In fact, that's one of the core area that I want to spend more time. Maybe when I come over there, Sridhar, if you feel maybe I can take up this question, when I'm coming to that particular slide. I request you to probably,
Karthik,
wait
before
for a
you
few
go
more
there,
minutes.
sorry to stop you, but before you go there, I just want to address the first question here. Sridhar here, the guidelines are talking about, clearly talking about three lines of defense. So if you see the first line of defense lies with the IT function. The second line of defense is with the information security department, which typically reports to the head of risk, or the CRO of the organization. And so information security groups responsibility to conduct a risk assessment, and do the identify risk, and then identify the mitigation measures. And under the mitigation measure, they would prescribe some specific controls, tools, and technologies, and then those would be implemented by the IT team. In fact, they have clearly mentioned that the first line of defense, the head of IT function, shall ensure effective assessment and evaluation of management of IT controls, including implementation of robust internal controls.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I can start. Yeah. Okay. First is on the service management. In today's, the NBFC or
Karthik, just to stop you, have you got the structure right? Because there are a lot of questions coming on the structure, which Sridhar is raising, which is good, because this is a very important topic. I have Raman also. My view, Sridhar sir, whomsoever, this is my view. Again, this is interpretation. You have 3 or 4 committees defined in the circular, right? You have a steering committee, IT committee, and then the audit committee and risk committee, right? And all of them should flow into, according to me, the risk function. And the risk function will talk to the risk committee or the audit committee, whichever way it is. Interestingly, there's a CTO definition somewhere on the capacity management also. CTO is a very special role called out. And then somewhere down the line, there's a disaster recovery, CDO or a disaster recovery officer. So all of them somewhere will report into CRO. Looks like the whole organization structure has to be tuned that way, because there are various organizations we have seen still CISOs out, CTOs out, and there are a lot of responsibilities in the circular. So I think overall ownership somewhere It is a difficult question. Again, my interpretation. I leave it to the end for all the guests, and also I think practical questions are coming, so that's the way it is. So ultimately, CRO or CISO is also a very important function. But we've already seen CISOs now reporting to CROs, and inspection audit, which is internal audit or inspection audit in bank parlance, is owning most of this. But in some organizations, BAPT, etc., IT audits are done by under the CISO's office and still reporting into a CRO. They don't directly report into inspection, even though according to me, inspection should own most of the audits. So, but still there are structures different. But ultimately, compliance also comes into play somewhere because this surplus has to be owned up by the compliance officer. So ultimately, how this is going to be interpreted, there are 4 or 5 months given. The whole structuring of these various committees, restructuring some of these committees will be interesting to observe. So I don't want to stop taking away the gas out of Karthik or anybody else. Karthik, go ahead. We'll put more
yes,
questions. Very
thank
important questions are being raised. So happy to discuss.
I will give you my perspective around the RMCB, ITSC, and the ACB. See, from a ITSP point of view, what the circular also it states is that it will function under the governing of the risk committee, the risk management committee. Okay. Now, the main function of this ITSC is going to be to ensure that the policies and the procedure, the security policies and the procedure does cover all the related aspect, and also it ensure that effective implementation of the security policies and the procedure. Now, what the audit committee, ACB that you're talking about, its major role is to ensure that the IT audits, whatever has been performed for the RE, right? Whether the IT audits, has covered appropriate scope, whether the IT audit report, whatever it would have got from the the specific, the fintech companies as well, right? Whether does it cover all the related risk as such, whether complaints are being othered. So there is a clear distinguish between the information security committee and the audit committee. But I know, as you also would have rightly pointed out, the security committee would work under the governance of the risk management committee, is what the circular also it states. I hope I've answered your question. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the IT infrastructure and service management. See, in today's world, the service management becomes very critical. Some of the critical aspect that the service management that an NBFC or the small finance bank would face today is that the major would be the customer satisfaction, and second would be a competitive edge, because a good service will set the NBFCs apart from their competitors. But it also comes with a cost, right? So one is going to be your risk management, because some of the services are being provided by them, and systems are exposed to the operational risk, and thereby the efficiency comes into play. The technological integration will come into play. Critical aspect will be the data security and privacy and the regulatory compliance, and adaptation to the changing demands also comes into play. Something goes wrong, the brand gets impacted. So thereby the service management today, which is being provided by a third party, which I'll also talk about a third party in a separate, in a few minutes right now, is going to play a huge factor. Now, thereby establishing a robust IT service management framework, for an operation resilience becomes very, very important. So quickly to give an example to you. So assuming, the NBFC is going to implement an IT service management framework to ensure that operation resilience of these IT systems, infrastructure, including the disaster recovery sites, right? So for example, to manage the IT service effectively, it also, creates a protocol for incident management, change management, problem management to maintain operational resilience. Additionally, it also should ensure that the DR sites are being regularly tested and ready to take over in case of a system failure or disaster. This is a very, very basic, but still most of the companies that, where we have done an audit have faced where, the DR is not able to support them, when they are in need of it. The second aspect of it becomes the service level management process for effective operations. So which is so-called SLM, on the circular also, is critical for managing the IT operations while ensuring a clear, the segregation of duties to maintain service quality. For example, if I will talk about the process to define, negotiate, and manage a service level agreement with an internal department or a external service provider. So this will clearly includes specifying the response time for the IT support, system availability requirement, resolution time for incidents to ensure efficient and timely service delivery while maintaining your segregation of duties also. And the third aspect will be under the service management is your outdated hardware and software and technology refreshment. Let me be very honest. Many orders that we do or many clients that we visit, they have most of the outdated operating systems, and which probably would have not been replaced. So thereby the framework also clearly brings out there's something called a technology refresh plan, thereby for them to monitor the outdated dates of the software, AMC dates of the hardware. So thereby a technology refresh plan that outlines the scheduled upgrades or replacement for hardware and software components to maintain the optimal performance and the security. For instance, again, if I have to talk about a regulatory updating, regularly updating your operating systems and replacing the absolute servers to prevent a vulnerability and to ensure a compliance. So this is again something which they've also insisted that the respective the REs or to look at. And then other aspect talks about the clock time synchronization. I think most of us would be aware on a clock time synchronization. And then guidelines for a third-party arrangement, which is also one of the key part is, for managing the third-party IT arrangement, emphasize risk mitigation, compliance, and also to ensure a high availability of the services. Now, the next aspect is on the capacity management, which in today's world, because of the increasing in the technology advancement and increasing in the number of the loans being granted on the digital mode, so there requires a proper capacity management and a utilization to ensure that there is no performance issue. And there are many companies when they have to go for an unplanned downtime if the capacity is not managed appropriately, and thereby you'll have an increased operational cost. And then you also would agree with me that there's a scalability challenges many companies are facing today, and because of which you'll have to probably bring certain hardware which has not been hardened appropriately, and thereby the vulnerabilities have been exposed. And then the ineffective resource allocation also happens in most of the company, lack of business continuity, and thereby the competitive disadvantage, right? So thereby the capacity manager helps really the management to plan accordingly and service your probably customer in appropriate way, not only from cyber angle but also from a customer service angle also. Now, from a capacity management point of view, what the circular also mandates is that the capacity management and assessment to be undertaken. Now, what is this capacity management and assessment? That's something most of you would probably think about, or some of you will be really well versed in that. Let me give an example to it. A proactive assessment of the capacity constraints and ensuring systems can handle the expected loads is very crucial. Now, for example, let's say the NBFC is experiencing a 30% surge in transactions during this period. The preemptively the action is that upgrade the server capacity by 40% to accommodate the future growth and maintain a smooth operation. So this assessment includes the past trends, allows the IT team to plan effectively, and present the findings annually to the board or IT strategy committee for their review. Now, second aspect of the capacity also comes from a supporting business function and service delivery channel. So ensuring the IT systems facilitate the seamless business operation and the service delivery channel. So for example, again, an NBFC is launching a new mobile banking app to provide a customer with enhanced services. Now, to ensure system availability, the IT team conducts a rigorous testing, including your stress test to verify the system can handle increased user traffic without crashing. So they set up to render service support the app, ensuring it remains available during the peak usage period also. And third one becomes IT capacity planning aligned with the business requirement, which is very, very critical. For example, if I will talk about the NBFC can proactively manage IT capacity to ensure systems can handle a peak load, support business function, and align the future technology needs, with the business objective. And such practices allow for continuous and uninterrupted operations, even during the periods of increased demand or expansion. Now, moving to the third-party risk. Now, third party is, I think, very favorite topic to most of us, because most of the REs today outsource everything to a third party. Now, that could be a concentration risk, right? Now, second becomes major dependency risk also, and thereby it also brings you a reputation risk. So I can talk about risk for multiple risk on a third party, but to talk about a few, and I'll talk about operational risk, regulatory risk, cyber secure and data privacy risk, reputation risk, dependency risk, and finally a financial risk also comes into play. So thereby there is too much of risk that we are exposed to a third, because outsourcing everything to a third party, or rather depending on a third party, there everything gets concentrated at one particular party. Now, because of that, what they say is that they would require enhanced vendor risk assessments that are required to be looked at. Now, today, typically when I go to a client and then when I say a vendor risk assessment, typically they say they have a checklist and then say we are assessing the third party on a periodical basis. But what becomes very critical is that how detailed is your vendor risk assessment? That becomes very, very important. Because, for example, if I talk about the NBFC conducts a comprehensive vendor risk assessment, before engaging with a cloud service provider. And they also evaluate vendor security protocols, data encryption method, compliance, whether the compliance is as per the industry standards or not. Do they have any past security incidents? What is their financial stability? So there are some of these factors, which we may talk at very high level, or we may assess them from the high level, but these are very, very critical from a risk assessment process to understand, what is their security culture is all about. What is certain the entity level of the third party, how are they approaching their the risk at the IT perspective, and also their financial stability too, because something goes wrong, they're going to say I'm going to shut it down and your company is going to be completely under the risk. And then the risk mitigation control, I'm assuming where the risk stands for, right? What is the mitigation factor? That again becomes very key. Most of us will say yes, tick, and some of us will say no. Okay, if it's no, what is the mitigation factor that we are looking at, right? That becomes very key. So for example, after the assessment that you do, the NBFC imposes specific controls on a vendor contract, requiring a regular security audit, strict access control, encryption standard. So are we capturing any of these as part of our agreement? That's the biggest question. That is where if you refer to DLG, the Digital Lending Guideline, they clearly called out stating that the technology standard should be brought in as an annexure to the agreement, thereby your third party or a fintech company should be complying with that. But how far are we looking into it in detail, in seriousness, in a serious way, and that becomes more apt also. Now the contract specifies a notification procedure for security incidents and requires the vendor to maintain a robust disaster recovery and business continuity plan as well. And then it also talks about ongoing monitoring and review. So the NBFC continually monitors the vendor adherence of security standard and conducts periodic assessment to ensure a compliance. They maintain open communication channel with the vendor to promptly address any identified security gap or emerging trend. So thereby, this third-party assessment is going to help you to not only that it becomes an audit as such, but it also becomes the responsibility of the RE, which again percolates down to the board. Right? That is exactly what I want to communicate. So thereby today the circular also mandates that they should be aware of all the risks that the RE is facing, or rather looking up as on today. Right? So Aniket, do you want to add anything further on this, on the third party?
Yeah, thanks, Karthik. So in fact, in the month of April, RBI had issued a circular on IT outsourcing risk. And as per that, the regulated entities have to set up a framework. And in the appendix, they have also mentioned certain services or activities are not to be considered under outsourcing of IT services or that master direction. But here, interestingly, what RBI has prescribed that the information technology cybersecurity ecosystems are not within the applicability of RBI outsourcing of information technology directions 2023. RE shall put in place appropriate vendor risk management process. So this particular domain is now they have made it applicable for the IT outsourcing services which they excluded from that circular. So in fact, they had also given the specific examples like the corporate internet banking services, then external audit such as vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, SMS gateways, procurement of IT hardware appliances, all these services that actually excluded from that IT outsourcing circular. Now they have brought in the purview of the vendor risk third party arrangement as a part of this circular.
Yeah. Thanks, Aniket. So now moving to the project management, this is something where I want to spend some of the time on a project management, for the reasons that, most of the companies today are, rapidly developing on, the artificial intelligence, I would say, or, they're developing more in terms of, the RPAs, and AI becomes a critical factor for most of the NBFCs today because of, the rule engine they develop for, digital lending. So thereby, it also becomes very critical whether are we aligned to strategic alignment of the organization. Because I tell you the reason is most of the companies today, they develop too much of technology, and at a point, they feel that the technology is too much on board, and thereby they want to reorganize the technology stack. So thereby, whether the project that you're looking at, it doesn't have, is that been aligned strategically to the organization goals and objective becomes a prime factor. Second is, the resource optimization, which is not only to do with, the human resource, also the finances, whether, the utilization of it, whether, is there unnecessary costs running around. Then comes, your timely delivery and efficiency. Then also the quality assurance becomes a very critical factor. And then the stakeholder management, right, for including your customers, investors, regulators, internal team. So effective project management includes stakeholder engagement, communication, and also managing the expectation to ensure their needs are met. But then this also leads to the risk management. It also would lead to your operational risk to help and mitigate the strategies to identify, assess, and manage risk effectively. And also the innovation and adaptation of new ideas, technology, business model with a legal requirement, avoiding penalties and regulatory issue. And thereby, the any project that we're talking at, I'm talking the major project, would have so much of implications. So thereby, in the summary, the project management plays a vital role in an NBFC by ensuring effective planning, execution, monitoring, and the control of various initiatives and the project, which is also going to be overseen by the IT steering and IT strategy, at the board level too, from a project manager's point of view. Now, talking about specific aspect what the framework has highlighted, the adoption of the emerging technology and enterprise architecture planning. Let's give a scenario. NBFC plans to integrate AI and an automation tools into the existing technology stack to enhance this customer service and streamline the internal process. Additionally, they also aim to leverage an application programming interface, which is called API, to facilitate seamless integration with the external parties. So what happens is that the NBFC is required to follow a standardized, a planning methodology to ensure a structured approach to adopt the new technologies. Not only that, they also should align with the business and IT strategy and the risk appetite. So what is my risk appetite, right? I need to evaluate the potential benefits and the risk associated with the AI, automation, and APIs, and ensuring the alignment with the risk appetite. Which is all the companies are looking into it seriously? My answer strictly is no, because you're looking more in terms of the business, the technology. But how far are we serious to bring in the risk appetite becomes a more focal factor for most of the companies today to look into that perspective. And the security and resilience consideration, the NBFC plays a strong emphasis on security and resilience while adapting these technology, because today in AI we talk about too much of data has been exposed to. Now, are we looking from a privacy concern? Now, good that the data DPDP came out, which also puts a lot of factors in terms of how the data should be classified, how the data should be masked, how the data should be encrypted, which wasn't the case before, right? So, for instance, encryption of sensitive data, multi-factor authentication, regular security audits. Not that these were not there before; it was there, right? But now there's a specific focus that all of these are also required to be, covered as part of your project management itself. And then we spoke about a word called data dictionary. I think most of us would be really aware of a word called data dictionary. But from a framework perspective, what a data dictionary talks about is that how the data will be standardized and how the data elements are used across various application systems. Are we classifying it? And this initiative promotes the data sharing among different departments, a common understanding data among IT and business users, and facilitate a seamless information exchange. Now, for example, if I talk about the overall outcome, what I'm trying to say is that a standardized enterprise architecture planning methodology and aligning the adoption of new technology with their risk appetite and the overall strategy should be linked to the management direction along with the risk appetite as well. Now, Raman, sir, do you want to add something on the risk appetite before I go to the next topic on the framework?
Karthik, I guess it is fine. Unless we have question, you covered it well.
Okay.
But coming back again, only one point I would like to stress. There are certainly try to look GRC with also like other either outsourcing guideline or DPDP Act or couple of other framework like from ISACA on digital trust. You can try to look at then see whether your risk appetite is okay and what are kind of the risk, then what is the control. Look at a kind of a wholesome picture. That is most important. Go ahead, Karthik.
Yeah, thank you. So now and then the second aspect. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So consistent and formally defined project management approach also required as per the framework. For example, if NBFC plans to implement a new digital banking platform to enhance the customer experience and streamline the online transactions, right? So the project involves various stakeholder, IT, software developers, marketing team, customer service representative. So thereby, it requires a project management, a formally defined project management approach. And also, you should also try to approach should also emphasize the appropriate stakeholder participation, which ensures the key stakeholder from different department, function area are also being actively involved in the project. Now, the third aspect that it also talks about is that information on major IT projects that have a significant impact on the RE risk profile. Again, let me quote RE risk profile. And strategy shall be reported to the IT strategy committee. Such projects shall undergo appropriate strategic and cost reward analysis on a periodical basis. So an example to it, to make it even more, in a transparent way, NBSC decides to implement a new core banking system that significantly, would impact its operation, risk profile, strategic objective. So this project aims to enhance on operation efficiency and improve the customer service and ensure regulatory compliance. Now, reporting process to IT strategy committee would be identify a major IT project would be required, which has substantial impact on the organization risk profile, operation strategy, and then the strategic and cost reward analysis, a strategic analysis. Now, the IT strategy committee conducts strategic analysis periodically to assess how the projects align with the NBSC's overall business and IT strategies. So they evaluate how the new core banking system contributes to organization long-term goals and the competitive positioning as well, right? And then you also talk about the strategic alignment, whether the project that you're looking at, does it have a strategic goals, providing enhanced services, and compliance are being looked at from regulatory requirement perspective. So the conclusion is the reporting and the analysis process ensures that the major IT project in an NBFC undergo a strategic alignment checks and also a cost assessment also, which are essentially into a reward that encourages people to adhere to all of this. A structured approach allows the IT strategy committee also to make an informed decisions regarding the project continuation or adjustment based on the impact on an overall risk profile and the strategic objective of the organization. Now, moving on to the next topic on data migration. So data migration, again, a key, I think I spoke about technology stack, right? So many companies today are moving to multiple technologies and they want to relook into a technology. So either they want to contract everything to one or two, or they want to expand more. So there's a lot of technology movement happens, and there's a data migration also gets involved. So what are some of the risks that many companies look at today? Data loss, yes. Incomplete data transfer, absolutely yes. Downtime, business disruptions. There are vulnerabilities because transfer sensitive financial and customer information. If not properly secured, the data can be vulnerable to breaches or unauthorized access during the migration process. Compatibility, integration issues, and finally, it comes to the cost overruns and delay, and thereby regulatory compliance challenges, and finally to a reputational damage. So thereby the data management is quite simple. But today in most of the boards, they're appointing an independent party to look at data migration and asking them to provide an independent report on the data migration by itself to understand what are the various nuances that that it has not been probably looked up by the management. And not only that, many RBI inspection today also look at the data migration, data inconsistencies, and they also try to understand what is the root cause. So data migration becomes a very good a point for the management to have a proper planning to understand. So thereby a data migration policy is a very basic step for companies to to create and document the data migration strategy and approach, ensuring the data integrity. For example, the policy mandates the verification and validation process at each stage of a data migration to maintain the data integrity. Again, an instance could be duplication, data cleansing, what are the validation checks to be performed, and finally, the sign-off on the business user and the application owners becomes very much crucial for us to have a successful data migration. And then we talk about the physical control access controls. The circular also mandates that the RE shall implement suitable physical and environmental controls to prevent the impairment of data through physical access and damage or destruction of the physical infrastructure and facility. And then the data center and disaster recovery site should be geographically well separated so that both sides are not affected by a similar threat. But this typically comes from a on-premise, setup, I would say. I think cloud, to my experience, fairly, we just go and decide our secondary servers, etc. And then also they're also pushing to ensure that the DC and DR are adequately monitored from a CCTV camera, and recordings therefore are reviewed on an ongoing basis. Again, a catch here is that the CCTV laws are not being rated by most of the data center companies. So be ensure that you capture them as part of your agreement, that the CCTV footage and recordings are available for the round the year, and thereby those should also be available for the auditors to assess and then come back on their opinion on those controls too. On the access control, access to information as such shall be allowed only when a valid business need exists. Typically there are two aspects to it. Let me probably talk about in a detailed way. There is a third party who has a constant privilege access, which is called a standing access that we call about, to the production server. Is it required? The answer is definitely no, because you would not know what he does on the production server. What is the control that the third party has to ensure that all the activities are being recorded, right? So thereby, any specific activity that a person has been performing from a privilege access standpoint of view is required to be approved. While I say this is to be approved, it should come from a policy or a standard procedure, what should be done from a privilege access granting, and also what should be done from a recording of the activity, who is going to review it, and etc. So the person with elevated system access entitlement shall be closely supervised with all their system activities logged and periodically reviewed. So RE shall adopt multi-factor authentication for a privileged users. Aniket, do you want to add something further before I go to the audit trail? Sorry, go next slide. Yeah, I think it's stuck. Saravanan, you can go next slide. Yeah. Okay. Audit trails and logging capability. I think most of us would be aware of the recent MCA circular also, that came out with an audit trail, which, enforcing the companies to have the audit log enabled from a book of accounts perspective. Now, this circular, is talking more from a audit trails, from the LMS point of view, or rather, I would rather talk about every IT application that access the sensitive information within the NBFC would require to log the activity, who has looked into what, whether has he modified it, has he inserted certain data, etc. For example, the core banking system logs transaction detail, user action, timestamp, and a user identification. But is it not good enough? No, because you also need to retain the logs, right? For a compliance perspective also. And third is the purpose of the security of the audit trail is to ensure that tomorrow something goes wrong. These audit trails can help you from a forensic investigation and also from dispute resolution point of view, and also in terms of non-repudiation purposes. So thereby the NBFC should ensure, the RE should ensure the security and integrity of audit trails by implementing robust log management and also retention framework. And this also can be part of your agreements or a technology standard document that you probably would provide it to your third party. So another aspect is that most of us say I have an SIEM. SIEM logs everything. Unless you're gonna integrate the server to SIEM, the SIEM will not log those, will not track those logs also. So there we need to ensure what SIEM does and what a third party also does with the SIEM. And the outcome of this audit trail is that by implementing a documented, the policy around the log management and around the retention framework, it will help the management to adhere to regulatory compliance, and also from something goes wrong tomorrow, it also help you to investigate further and understand where things have gone wrong. Now, the other favorite topic, it talks cryptographic control. Now, today, when we go for an audit, almost all of us say that everything has been encrypted, right? But is it good? But then there are still a lot of issues that many companies face today, which could be the key management, which again one of the key aspect, because all the keys are being stored in a specific server. Now, the poor key management practice such as weak key generations, insecure storage, improper key distribution can lead to vulnerabilities and thereby compromising the confidentiality and the integrity of the encrypted data. And second aspect comes algorithm weakness, misconfiguration, implementation errors, insufficient encryption. And then you also talk about the supply chain risk, where the banks and NBS rely on various third party for cryptographic tools and services, and such as compromised software or hardware components could introduce vulnerabilities into cryptographic infrastructure. And then most of us also looking at the cognitive technologies also, but that also brings out the compliance and regulatory risk, which regarding the cryptographic controls can lead to a legal and regulatory repercussions too. And thereby it also may have a penalties, fine or restrictions. Operational challenge also comes into play. And then the lack of the updates and patching also creates a lot of vulnerabilities and exploitation. So let's look into the circular, what it talks about. I'll talk a quick overview about it. Encryption protocols and prevention of manual data intervention. For example, implementation of a strong encryption and prevention of manual data modification also very much required. Key length algorithm, and then we talk about the applicable protocols for secure transmission. We also talk about from a data transfer from one system to other system. Is it an automated data transfer, which is called a straight-through processing, which is what framework talks about. It's nothing but the automated data transfer and processing. But is it good enough? No, because you have an API which integrates one onto the other application. Thereby, does it facilitate a seamless, secure data transfer between system, whether that particular data transfer has been encrypted, and what are the various algorithms being used, what is the key length being used, even those are also required to be looked at. But again, one of the help that many companies may require is that what is the standard that I need to look at from API standard point of view, right? So there is again, a global standard from API security, which, you guys can probably, go back and refer to the global standard. I can refer some of it, later part of the session, which you can probably also refer to. And then the data integrity checks and control, right? Just because the data goes from one to the other, it happens automatically. All the encryptions are good. Does it good enough? The answer is no, because there should be an integrity checks, and all the other integrity check also is required to be performed to ensure that the transfer is complete, and thereby it remains unaltered. So the outcome of this cryptographic controls and straight-through processing is that by adopting a robust encryption protocol with a strong key length, algorithm, cipher suits, Ensuring the automated data transfer process without a manual intervention, the NBFC can enhance the security and integrity of its sensitive financial data. This proactive approach minimizes the risk of unauthorized access and data manipulation or tampering during the transmission, thereby safeguarding the confidentiality and reliability of the customer information and financial transactions. Anyone wants to add anything further on this? Aniket or Raman sir, on cryptographic control?
I think Karthik, we can move ahead.
On the straight through processing, how does it work? Because there's a lot of practical issues. He says no manual intervention while data is being transferred. It's a very big topic, right, for the discussion. So I don't know how this can be implemented as a practical challenge, according to me. Maybe Raman sir from the industry can talk about it, but I see this is a big practical challenge.
So Ravi sir, I would like to add here. So it's a good, it's very good move from RBI in terms of reducing the manual interventions, because whenever the data moves from one application to another application for the purpose of processing, a lot of times still they have these batch processes in place, and whenever there is a batch process, one has to actually understand, sorry. Hello. Yeah, so one has to ensure the integrity of data, what is going out, whether there are right input output controls in place or not, so that one has to ensure. The straight through processing will actually ensure that there is no manual intervention, and whenever the information is passing from one application to another application, it is during the transaction itself, at the time of transaction itself, that is taken care of. So it won't be a kind of post facto. Yeah, Karthik, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah.
How are you going to practically view it from industry? So many applications run, LOS, LMS, multiple systems, CBS run. So there's one question from the Vinay Kumar.
Yeah, I think I can take that up, sir. Vinay
Yeah.
Kumar, I think he has, his question is, how do we track transaction which has been entered and deleted without sending for approval? See, this again will fall under a concept of, the validity. Validity of a transaction. Now, typically, the validity of transaction happens when the post and approval happens in most of the cases. So thereby, assuming that the transaction has not been approved, thereby a transaction will not even be valid enough for it to be posted into your ledger or to your specific the book of accounts or GL accounts, right? So thereby, if somebody is going to post and delete it, it may not have that greater impact because the validity of a transaction does not have any impact on the organization as a whole. So thereby, you need to identify such transactions which may have an impact to your GL accounts or to the book of accounts or to your ledgers, and thereby those would require to be monitored in detail with a closer lens. I hope I answered your question, Vinay.
Karthik, just to add, I would ask probably, track those deleted transactions, why they deleted, from a forensic or behavioral red flag for a different context, but that is also important. If a person continuously, like once in a week or once in a month, try to put a transaction, it could be like testing the waters, right?
Absolutely. You're right, Raman, sir. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I assume I've answered the question. So I'll move to teleworking right now. Again, the teleworking, talks on the aspect of secure data and, the information, between the environments. So typically the first aspect could be, some of the aspects could be, the encryption and secure transmission. So encourage the use of encrypted communication channels. For example, VPNs, has been used more after the COVID or post-COVID stage to transmit sensitive data. Implement secure file sharing platform or tools that encrypt both data and trust. Because we have heard many cases where ransomware attack, typically the attacker could have probably lost in a file server, and then probably most of the files that are available, the file sharing platform has not been encrypted. Thereby, he has got access to those. So thereby, it becomes very critical to encrypt those data also. And then the second aspect could be the access control authentication, and for strong authentication measures, employ role-based access, very, very critical. It's a limited access to sensitive data. And then data handling policies, for example, storage, sharing, and disposal. Ensure employees are aware of, and how to comply and what are the data protection regulations and company policies. Endpoint security, very, very, very basic, but very, very critical, because it required the use of company provided and approved devices with updated security software, patches, antivirus. Also, most companies today, while they're not being connected to the your network, they're not being patched, and thereby it becomes very vulnerable. And then implement the remote device management, enforce security configurations, and monitor devices for compliance. And then you also talk about the secure collaboration tools. Provide employees secure collaboration to that encrypt communication, enable secure document sharing and collaboration. And then regular security awareness training, very, very critical again. We typically take crux and we do once in a quarter, and then people may not be really aware. Ensure we keep sending them very frequent flyers or something through email. Data backup and recovery, one of the leading institute, the very critical aspect for even for a ransomware attack, they say an effective backup management. A quick talk about that is because the typical way what the attacker does is he would ensure that the backup has been he compromises the backup copies also. So thereby the companies who are into the attack, they will not be able to restore the data, and the data also gets encrypted. So thereby they have no other option to go back and pay the ransom, right? So thereby the data backup and recovery becomes a very crucial aspect, especially I would say the recovery management. Most of the company were not bothered about the restoration process. I'm not trying to say that because we never been exposed to such a scenario, and thereby after ransomware attack, the backup and recovery management has had a huge attention to it. So even not when a ransomware attack point of view, a security incident happens today, the backup becomes more critical. And second is the monitoring and logging. Again, logging all the activities and who has accessed the network, who has performed what. There's also something called the signature-based and the behavioral-based patterns. I don't know how many of you know there's a lot of EDR solution that many companies are using today. But most of the EDR solution is the signature based. Those are outdated. But this EDR solution should be like a behavioral based. What is behavioral based? For example, attacker comes in, he tries to insert a file, he tries to delete a file, he tries to update a file, right? That's a behavioral. Whether your EDR solution is capable of identifying those behaviors and trying to raise an alert, and that is an advanced technology, which EDR perspective that many companies should be looking at today. That is also one of the, the recent trends that, which, probably caught to the line, which I thought of sharing with all of you also. And then incident response and reporting, very, very basic. And then, it requires to be really looked at, from not only from RE perspective, also from your third party perspective too. Now, I will talk about metrics in length in the risk management point of view. While there is one question, I think we have few more to cover. Maybe I'll take up all the questions in the end, if that's fine with everyone. From a risk management perspective, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, I'll cover the metrics in the risk management part of that. Yeah. Next slide, please, Saravana. Yeah. So this circular has also emphasized more on the IT and InfoSec risk management. The identification of the RE's IT asset and their security classification based on the criticality to the RE operations, right? It could be, or the internal, or the external. But end of the day, the evaluation of their likelihood and impact, becomes very critical. So thereby, the implementation of a comprehensive information security management function, the internal control and the processes, including the applicable insurance covers to mitigate and manage the identified risk becomes very critical. So the implemented controls and the process must be reviewed periodically on their efficacy in a risk environment, characterized by change, and also define the roles and responsibility of a stakeholder, including a third-party person involved in the risk management. So some of the areas, could be where more than one stakeholder take responsibility, right? And the accountability gap comes into play. Where in the end of the day, what happens? Nobody takes any responsibility, right? So there are too many people and nobody takes responsibility. So thereby, we'll have to clearly identify what is the responsibility of each and every person, who is part of the risk management, and also, what are the various steps to eliminate and how do we manage the risk. So there's also a specific word that has been brought out, in the crown jewel, which is also, it speaks about. Now I'm going to talk about that. What is a crown jewel? See, the crown jewels that, Circle also talks about is also in terms of what are the really critical, sensitive information that, if something goes wrong, will have a huge impact, and thereby the authorities also would probably question, and thereby the companies would be under the law. So those are called a crown jewel. So thereby it becomes very essential for you to classify the data. So what are the critical data? What are the, the sensitive data? What are the highly classified, sensitive information which is required to be safeguarded? And thereby the IT asset also comes into play, right? So thereby the establishing a robust IT risk management framework is crucial for safeguarding a sensitive data, ensuring an operational resilience, and mitigating a potential risk. Now, for example, I talk about the critical assets, right? Critical assets could be the database contains sensitive customer financial information, and transaction processing systems handling a large volume of daily transactions are typically classified as a critical assets due to their significant impact on a business operation. What could be a non-critical asset? An example could be, talking about certain communication tools intel that we use, which does not have direct impact on the financial transaction or from a compliance perspective. Now, then, the circular also mandates a periodic risk assessment, right? Now, for example, we talk about a periodic risk assessment is that evaluate the internal and external threats facing the IT assets, could be vulnerability assessment, and also the threat intelligence analysis, a regular monitoring of the industry-specific threat intelligence sources to assess emerging cyber threats and their potential impact on the IT assets. And then we talk about, the implementation of the security measures, right? So encryption again will come into play, access control will come into play, the security training will come into play, and then we also talk about define the roles and responsibility, right? So then the third-party vendor management comes into play. Whether are they aligned with the NBS security standards to prevent the accountability gaps or conflict? And then we talk about, as I said, the crown jewels, which circular also talks about, which contains highly sensitive data and thereby critical infrastructure that comes into play. And thereby we need heightened security measures to protect those against cyber threats. And then we also talk about the evaluation of the critical information infrastructure as per the regulatory guidelines. We also need to qualify critical information infrastructure. For instance, we talk about system responsible for handling large-scale transactions or maintaining critical infrastructure are identified and protected as per the standards set by the regulatory authorities. Thereby, it becomes very critical. And there's other good aspect that came out is that the RPO and RTO, very, very interesting subject, RPO and RTO. While I provide, my insights around it, maybe Aniket and Ramachandran can also add their views, once I complete on it. See, the RPO and RTO, all of us would be, really aware, right? But then it also, brings other aspect also. For example, RPO, and quickly talk what is RPO, is a maximum tolerable amount of a data loss that an organization can afford in case of an incident or disruption. Now, for example, a core banking system, the RPO for a core banking system or NBSC might be set at 0 because in case of an incident, the company cannot afford to lose any transaction data and must recover the exact point just before the incident occurred. Then you talk about a customer database. For customer database containing sensitive financial information, a RPO might be set to a few minutes or a few hours, allowing a minimal data loss tolerance. I mean, there's not a Bible. I'm just sharing my thought process for you to make it to simpler and make you to understand. And I talk about an RTO. RTO is again allowable downtime an organization can endure for a specific IT service or a system or an application, right? So it indicates the time within which system should be recovered. For example, the online banking platform, which I talk, a typical, the banking case, where there, if it's going to be a few hours or less than that. So thereby system must be restored and should be accessible to the customer. Now there are other metrics also, that came into play, which is called mean time between failure, mean time to repair, and percentage of data recovery success. And then you also talk about the system availability percentages. Now let's talk about your system availability percentage. It's very easy, right? For example, how do we measure system availability percentage? It's gonna be your uptime divided by a downtime into downtime plus uptime, right? So thereby, typically every company would expect that CBS to be up for about 99.99% availability rate. Now, what is the mean time between failure? There's again one of the the definition gave in the circular also is that what is the average time between the instance of failure or a system breakdown? For example, I'm talking about what is the time duration that a particular, let's say, customer relationship management software, right, was running, let's say, for 30 days. In the 30 days, how many times that particular software had a failure or a system breakdown? That gives you understanding of what is the mean time between a failure. Now, what is the mean time to repair again, right? The mean time to repair again comes in. For example, I talk about average time taken to restore a platform to a operational status, right? Assume something has gone wrong. What is my time to repair to bring it back to the operational status? Could be 2 hours, could be 1 hour, etc. And then the data recovery success, typically that gives a 98% success rate in recovering the data, or 99%, or 99.5%. So these are some of the aspects that a company should put their thought process to understand and work out where they are, and accordingly put a risk management, the mitigation process in place. So thereby it becomes very significant on assessing the reliability, resilience, and efficiency of the NBFC IT systems. I'll stop here for a few seconds, maybe because a very critical aspect. Raman sir or Aniket, you want to add anything on this aspect, on the RTO and RPO aspects?
Thanks, Karthik.
Sure, Karthik. Couple of points like you did mention, you covered. The one thing is the business impact analysis. If that is not carried out for enterprise, only for few function, though they may call critical, it's not going to serve the purpose. That is important because in a risk assessment, certainly organization, particularly if they are looking from a technology perspective, or many of the processes would be dependent on some sort of kind of automation or technology, unless and until they know they involve different team of people, functional people. I think that is the most important. One of the question what has been raised in this also, a typical RTO of 3 hours or 4 hours, would that be okay? I don't think we should look at that way. Carry out enterprise-wide BAA and then look at the step by step. And the BAA should be based on your risk assessment. Do you have a list of critical application which are most important? And like what Karthik was mentioning, it should also be based on your resilience kind of practice. That should cover not just technology, not just operation. It could be people, it could be infra, anything. It is a big, I would call like a version, but unless and until you cover that, your RTO or RPO may not help much. So it is a detailed exercise, but it is part of the requirement, and it is also going to add value for the organization if you look at positively.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yes, yeah. I think Aniket, you want to add further?
No, so as Raman said rightly, only RTO, identification of RTO and RPO will not help the organizations. It's basically, how frequently you are testing, that is important. Because at the time of actual disaster, your actual RTOs and RPOs should work. And regular testing will actually give you that confidence.
Yeah.
So on the metrics, anybody answering the metrics question from Sridhar?
Karthik, I will take the question on metric.
Sure, sir. Go ahead. Yeah.
For the KPI to work, I would call, first of all, my question, do we have appropriate KRI well defined? If the key risk indicator, that should have both, historical, that is lag indicator, and lead indicator, that is a forward looking. If we are looking at governance and risk, if people look at only historical based risk indicator, your performance indicator would also be, just trying to confirm whatever happened, or, it has not happened, just like a kind of a gap. It is not going to assist you. So try to look at first KRI before getting into performance metrics. I hope this answers.
How about tools? Tools, anything, Karthik or Aniket, on the tools front, metrics tools?
Aniket, do you want to take on that, on the tools, on the metrics part of it?
Karthik, go ahead.
Yeah, there are many tools that we have, in the today's market, which also helps to understand, the various risks, not only from, what you define. Also, it brings in the other factors in terms of regulatory approach or, the global standard. What are some of the key risks that we need to look at? And thereby, it helps to consolidate all of it together and, gives one single dashboard, what is that we need to be looking at. And thereby, that helps us to, also measure, what are the key other vulnerabilities and, that we have been exposed to, and thereby can help us to also understand that. So there are various tools that are in the market, but I think the effectiveness of that will come unless until you review them and ensure that all the relevant the key risks are being also been factored as part of those particular tool or dashboard for that matter. So moving on to the policies and the procedure. For the establishment of the information security committee, I think which one of our participants also he brought out very rightly. What is the difference between the ISC and the risk management committee? So the information security committee within the oversight of the risk management committee plays a crucial role in managing the infosec within an organization, particularly within the context of the NBFC, because most of it also have to be relied upon by a third party. Now, the oversight and the constitution, the ISC operates under the oversight of the RMC, ensuring the alignment with the broader risk management strategies. The RMC determines the composition of the ISC, which includes the CISO, representative from various business units, and IT function. But the major responsibility of the ISC would be development and implementation of the security policies, which should be, again, as I said earlier, should also include a detailed procedure to be documented, and the standards also should be documented. This involves identifying, assessing, and managing the infosec risk to maintain alignment with the risk tolerance level. So I would really urge on that word, risk tolerance level. Approval and monitoring of security projects. It oversees and approves major infosec projects, ensuring they align with the organization standard security plans and budgets. Monitoring the project status, setting priority. I think all of us would also appreciate that fact that most of the companies today, we invest a lot on major project, and then it will overshoot the budget. The project may prolong, it may not give us a value, and thereby it puts us in a lot of trouble for various reasons. So thereby it becomes very critical to have a closer watch on it, setting priorities, establishing standards and procedure that falls under this purview, and also to help to understand supporting the security management program. So the Information Security Committee, the ISC, provides support for development and execution of a information security management program, which involves defining strategies, framework, plans for effective security management across the organization, reviewing security incident and assessments. It also helps you to review the incidents, security assessment, mitigation activity, identify the weakness, vulnerability, and areas needing improvement. This also includes, analyzing the incident, their causes, mitigation measures, etc. Security awareness program, addressing cyber security developments, report to the board or to the committee. The ISC reports its findings, activity, and recommendations of board or board level committee to ensure transparency, informed decision making, and gain necessary support for a security initiative. To give an example again, for NBSC compromising of a CISO, the representative from business and IT function, they collaborate, develop a comprehensive cyber security strategy. So they assess the potential risk, approve and monitor cybersecurity projects, review the security incident awareness program, ensuring the companies remain resilient against evolving cyber threats. So the insights and reports to the board aid in making informed decision about the security investment and strategies aligned with the NBSC risk appetite. So in summary, the ISP responsibilities encompass a wide range of activity to ensure the robust InfoSec governance, risk management, and compliance with the organization, especially in the context of the NBSC's operation and sensitive data handling. Right. So moving on to the VAPT. So I think this is something all of us are quite familiar, but there are a couple of the nuances that it has been highlighted and mentioned as part of the circular. So one is periodic VA and PT of the IT assets, application, system, and infrastructure throughout their life cycle, pre-implementation, post-implementation, and major changes. Major changes because very critical, because most of the company today, when they do a major change, they don't do a VA on it. So thereby it has also been brought out by appropriately trained and independent information security experts and auditors. So VA shall be conducted at least once in every 6 months and PT at least once in 12 months. So VA, PT, for all other ITSs, where any new IT infrastructure or applications introduced or existing applications undergone any major change shall be conducted based on their criticality and inherent risk as defined by the RE. Again, the responsibility goes on the RE, but again, it is very much critical for you to assess that. So in a post-implementation scenario, system upgrade or a IT project, the VAPT shall be performed on a production environment under unavoidable circumstances. If the PT, if you have referred to IRDA or new circular, there's a lot of emphasis on the PT, user ID being used. So again, the IRDA circular talks more about it. I'm not going to bring that right now, but I'm just trying to say where, both circulars trying to emphasize more on the PT testing. So if the PT is conducted in test environment, RE shall ensure that the version and configuration of test environment resembles the production environment. Any deviation should be documented and approved by the ISC. That's very important. So RE may also run approved VA scanning, automated VA scanning tools to automatically scan all the systems or network that are critical. Again, this becomes critical because if you're not having 100% systems, being, linked to it, you will not be able to scan, thereby those becomes vulnerable. Another interesting factor is that, assuming an attacker comes in, what happens is, if I had to couple both of these together, he understands what that particular system has access to. And what are some of the IDs and the access that that system also has, and thereby that is the reason if you look at most of the attacks, they will launch using a privilege access, they will compromise the privilege ID because of that particular system would have not been patched or not been scanned, and thereby the system would have the elevated access which has not been monitored, not been controlled, and even if it's going to install a tool to that particular ID, it again goes undetected. And then RE shall ensure that all vulnerability scanning is performed in authenticated mode. Ensure RE shall have a mechanism in place to carry out the PTs in a controlled manner. And then RE shall put in place a document approach for conducting VAPT, covering the scope, coverage, scoring mechanism, and all other aspects as well. And thereby, this may also apply to RE infrastructure application hosted in a cloud environment, right? So a quick example I will give you because we're also running short of a time. So connecting a VA and PT in in an NBSC, so you have to define the VA PT schedule based on criticality. Engage a independent security experts. It's better that you engage a independent security experts because they'll be able to have their own ways of assessing the risk. And then performing VA period of crucial stages in a major change or a post implementation. And then, you talk about automated scanning and continuous monitoring, especially for those handling up customer sensitive data, right? Timely remediation of identified vulnerabilities becomes very, very critical because we identify a vulnerability. There are many such vulnerability which has not been closed, which has also not been remediated. It just stays in your tool or a tracker. It goes for months together. But how is that risk been mitigated? Becomes a very big question that most of us may be not able to act on timely manner. And a document approach. So thereby the outcome of the VAPT is critical to ITSA, ensuring they meet a security standard and are resilient to the potential cyber threat. So by employing an independent expert and following a structured approach, the NBSCs maintain a proactive stance against the vulnerability, thereby safeguarding sensitive customer data when ensuring a robust security posture across IT infrastructure. With that, I'll move to the BCP. There are a couple of questions, Peter. I will definitely take this up in the end. Apologize. Because we have a few more slides to go. Once I complete it, and then we can take up all the questions. Yeah. Moving to BCP.
Karthik can go on PT on public-facing applications or.
So what happens in such cases? You have to get a report, from the respective, the authorities while for using the public-facing application. For example, let's say in terms of a specific, you're using a third-party application, right? See, any companies who are using a public-facing application, there's a lot of the frameworks which are required to be used to assess the PT. Typically, they'll say OSAP 10, top 10 risk. But it is not really enough. There are other risks also is required to be considered. So thereby, from PT perspective, also there are a lot of the recommendation and suggestions are coming out. But if you're using a third party application, which is probably you are enrolled into a third party, and probably you are using a subscription based the application, thereby you should push that particular third party to share you a secure code review report and also a PT report or a VA report. What are some of the the control weakness they have and how they've remediated it? You can very well you can approach them and understand on those aspects also for sure before you go for the implementation. I hope I answered the question, Sridhar. Yeah. Okay. Can we move next slide on the Saravanan, on the BCP and DR? BCP and DR, again, there's quite a lot of emphasis. I'm sure RBI also had a similar circular before. So I'll summarize on the BCP what the circular talks about, and then I will get into the concepts of what is that BCP and DR. Now it is decoding it. So from a BCP perspective, the circular also recommends that it shall have an ultimate responsibility. Who will have ultimate responsibility? REs will have ultimate responsibility and oversight over a business continuity of a RE functions. So the BCP policy shall adopt best practices based on the international standards, example ISO 2022-3001, to guide its action in reducing the likelihood or impact of the disruptive incidents and maintaining a business continuity. So the policy shall be updated based on major development and a risk assessment. I think I forgot to mention one aspect from a policy procedure standpoint of view is that the circular clearly mandates that they will have to review and approve the policy on an annual basis, which is ideal control that many companies have. But based on my experience, not all the policies undergo an annual review and updation to it. Updation may require in case you are probably having a vulnerability, there's a new risk introduced, or whatever, could be multiple reasons. So thereby they're saying that there should be a periodic updation to it, and at least if not an annual review and approval of it. And then from BCPDR perspective, also it falls under the same scenario. And then we talk about RE shall ensure the business continuity in the event of unforeseen disruptive incidents. RE shall take a business impact analysis assessment of the likelihood of a adverse event and access its impact on the RE's information assets and the associate business operation. And it also says RE shall regularly test the BCP under different scenario for all possible type of contingencies to ensure that it is up to date and effective. So thereby, testing of BCP shall include all the relevant aspects and the constituents of a RE: people, process, and resources. Now, the point is, there is too much of, the responsibility in RE, while most of the IT assets today are being managed by a third party. So thereby, it, requires a assessment, an independent assessment on the BCP policy, BCP test, and thereby, from a third party, and then that is also required to be reviewed by the REs as well. Now, to given hypothetical scenario, right? Assuming a non-banking financial company is developing its BCP to ensure a continued operation in case of unforeseen disruptive incidents following an international standard. So, but what happens, right? Assuming, if the board, does not overlook into it, the BCP policy is not being updated, and the business impact analysis also is not being, looked at. For example, from a critical system point of view, process point of view, and the testing is also not being done. So thereby it attack happens, and then that data, as we spoke in the previous slide, we spoke about multiple RPOs and RTOs. Everything will be under a major issue, and thereby your system is not up. You'll lose your one is that you'll have a reputation issue, you'll face operational risk, there is going to be a financial risk, etc. Right? So thereby the recommendation is that the board should oversee the BCP related responsibility of the policies and the procedure which would govern the BCP overall function, the BCP part of it. The BCP can also adopt the global standard, define the responsibility for reducing the likelihood or impact of disruptive incidents, and the policy can also outline roles, protocols, strategies, and regularly updating it based on the risk assessment and industry development. So thereby you should have a close watch on industry development, and then thereby go back and update your BCP policy too. Business impact analysis, I'm sure all of you would be aware, it becomes very crucial to conduct a BIA to assess the likelihood and impact of adverse events on information assets and the business operation. An example could be the BIA. The institution identifies critical system and process, evaluating the impact of downtime and financial transaction, customer service, and thereby regulatory compliance. Testing and updates, regular BCP testing under various scenarios should be undertaken to ensure the effectiveness and relevance. But again, critical, disasters like cyber attack, natural calamities, I'm sure, we would have, covered all of it as part of our BCP testing. It should also encompass all the aspects, right, on people, assuming that people are not available, how the service can happen, process and technology. Now, on the disaster recovery management, what the circular also, highlights is that the periodicity of a DR drill for a critical system shall be at least on a half-yearly basis, and for all the system at least on a yearly basis. Any major issue observed during the drill shall be resolved and tested again to ensure successful conduct of drill before the cycle. The DR testing shall involve switching over to the BR alternative site, and thus using a primary site for sufficiently longer period, and then for at least a full day of working. RE shall back up the data, restore the data, integrity should be checked. RE shall ensure that DR architecture and procedure are robust, meeting the defined RTO, RPO for any recovery operations in case of emergency. In the scenario of non-zero RPO, RE shall have a documented methodology for reconciliation of data by receiving the operation from alternate locations. RE shall also ensure configuration of servers, network devices, other products, and deploy security patches at the DC and the DR, this data center and disaster recovery, right? So RE shall ensure BCP and DR capabilities in critical interconnected systems and network, including those of the vendors and partners. So RE shall ensure the demonstrated readiness through collaborative and coordinated resilience testing. That means RE is RTO. So thereby, it is very much essential that your vendors and the partners fall with your RE's RTO, and thereby it becomes very much necessary that they put their process to ensure that the RE's RTO is being met. Now, a quick aspects what is more required on a DR to put in a more granular level: DR drills and testing, data backup and integrity, robust DR architecture and procedures, configuration consistency and readiness, resilience testing, and vendor readiness. So by implementing these aspects with this BCP and DRM, disaster recovery management, the NBFC prepares itself to effectively respond to incidents, minimize disruptions, and ensure the continuity of a critical operation, safeguarding its reputation and maintain the trust among the stakeholders. Right now, moving finally on the information systems audit. So the audit committee of the board shall be responsible for exercising oversight of its audit of the RE. RE shall put in place an IS audit policy, which is very much required. The audit policy shall contain a clear description of its mandate, purpose, authority, audit universe, and periodicity of the audit. The policy shall be approved by the audit committee board and reviewed at least on an annual basis. RE may consider, whenever possible, a continuous auditing approach for critical systems, performing control, and discusses on a more frequent basis. So typically, the audit in today's world, even when I talk about the digital lending guideline, or if I talk about an IRDA audit, or if I talk about the erstwhile, the IT, NBFC framework, or an IT outsourcing policy came today, there is a lot of emphasis on, the auditing aspect. Now, one is you will have to audit the third party. When you're auditing an RE, significant activities are being outsourced. So thereby it becomes more critical. But how do fintech companies or a third party know what is required to be implemented? And that is where the beauty is. RE also has been put into the responsibility of communicating what they should be implementing it. Right from the technology safeguard to the privacy policy, the RE should be communicating it. Now that is where the catch is. Whether RE is doing it effectively, the answer is, I would say, 80 to 20% ratio. But 80% are doing it to some extent, 20% still not there, because unless you communicate effectively to them, they will not be in a position to implement it. I will not say they will not be in a position, they would still be in a position, but whether have they met your objective or not will still under be a question. So there be a clear communication by the RE, what a third party should do, what you should be implementing it, what is your objective. All these have to be clearly outlined in an agreement or in a separate document, and thereby they are implementing it, and having an audit on that, and that audit report being shared with you will help you to understand on an ongoing basis where the risk stands, whether how are you compliant to the regulatory aspect, and thereby also will help the risk committee, your IT steering committee, strategy committee, and finally to the board to understand where the risk today stands and where they are also being exposed to. So with that note, I'll hand it over to Aniket and Raman sir, over to you for having more thought process, and I will happy to take questions post that.
Thanks, Karthik. So in fact, by combining various circulars and repealing the old circulars, further making the requirements crisp and clear, I think it's a good move by RBI to minimize ambiguity and provide clarity. These guidelines were already in force for scheduled commercial banks. In case of NBFCs, most of these requirements are getting covered in master directions. So from compliance point of view, per se, we don't see major challenge. However, we have to be mindful of stringent timelines, because we have only 4 months to comply with these directions. A quick gap assessment with respect to these guidelines will help you understand it. the current state and the corrective steps can be taken before 31st March 2023. Raman, over to you.
So I have some questions, Karthik and Aniket and Raman. One is this whole readiness you mentioned, right? How do you really say it's complied with within 4 months, 5 months? How do you test operating meaningfulness? Some things are very new, right? Committees are new. Is that good enough time to do it? How do you give a report? Or maybe it's still not clear whether it's internal or external, but it's mainly internal, right? So whatever management says, how do we handle this?
So if you look at Ravi sir, these guidelines, most of these guidelines were clearly prescribed for scheduled commercial banks in various other circulars. For NBFCs, yes, because in their master circular, the guidelines were brief. Example, like I mean, governance. The governance, as you said rightly, so a requirement to have so many committees, the roles and responsibilities of board. Those aspects were not, defined in so much details. So for them, they will have to do a kind of, like I mean, say, quick gap assessment in terms of, what do they have, what are they actually, already following, and then basis that they can actually define a roadmap for themselves from the compliance point of view. Because as per the circular, these guidelines will come in force from 1st April 2024. However, like I mean, the next year they will get from the implementation point of view, because at the end of 2025, when they would do the annual, information systems audit as per the requirements of this circular, then that time they will have to comply with all these requirements.
The question on IS audit, Karthik.
Is there any specific qualification required for information system audit as per this master direction, or it will be decided by each RE's IA department? I assume the question is the qualification for system audit required from a personal point of view. I think it's better that they are CISA qualified, and they also have understanding in terms of yeah from a let me finish that. So, it also depends upon, from a person. If you look at IRDA, audit, they've clearly mandated what is the qualification required for the, the person who's signing it and person who's performing the audit. So at the bare minimum, it is required that a person to be, CISA or equivalent to CISA, and also he has a right knowledge or experience in those relevant area. For example, if I'm looking into the AI, and thereby it becomes very much critical. I understand what is AI, right? It doesn't make any meaningful for me to just go and do an audit or a review around that. So thereby, to extent, RE can also look into the technical aspect of it, but I think more point of view is that the person who is performing an audit should have a relevant experience from that perspective. And certain empaneled auditors, if it is a firm. Yes, Aniket, you want to take this up? Yeah.
No, of course. I was talking. I'm going to talk about certain empanelment, because that is a kind of common requirement which is being prescribed by various regulators, that the auditor should be certain empaneled.
How will the cybersecurity guidelines issued separately by RBI have an impact with this matter direction kicking in? Would this master direction override the earlier issues cybersecurity? I think, Aniket, if you want to take this up.
Yeah. No, so nowhere they are commenting on the cybersecurity circular of 2016. So that will remain in force, because when it comes to cybersecurity, that circular is much more in detail, which follows NIST's cybersecurity framework.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I think we answered all the questions.
But that circular, that cybersecurity circular is applicable to scheduled commercial banks.
Yeah.
Not applicable to NBFCs.
Okay. I think
Thanks. Any other questions? Happy to take. Can post it on IA website or send a mail to us. We will redirect it to Karthik or Raman and Aniket. Thanks for the time, folks, and thanks for attending, all the attendees. Sorry, on a Saturday evening, I've taken some of your time, but I thought this is a very important circular, and you would have seen some directions also coming today from RBI on the fraud, and it's some important discussion is going on right now as I talk. Because even yesterday we had some other challenges, so it's becoming a highly critical. Technology audits are becoming very critical. Interface audits have become critical, and in between some of these compliances and governance, which is being discussed, right? This is also becoming a serious question: who will oversee IT audits and CTOs and CROs and DRPs, and crisis and resilience operation becomes super critical. So it's a massive circular, according to me. Even though it has been implemented in various forms and shapes in single form, it's going to be interesting how corporates adopt it and banks also take it forward. And over the next 4 months, we will watch. And rightly put, Aniket had said audit, but I think the regulators are now coming back on a monthly basis, asking a lot of questions. And so everybody should be on the watch out. But it's good for the industry because more digital happens, more it comes not only the flip side, the flop side is also the risk, cybersecurity risk, etc. And using overdose of these regulatory notes, and on top of it, the risk weightage also going up. So we had a lot of discussion. Me and Karthik, even yesterday, we had a lot of discussions and with the NBFCs and banks. So how the risk weightage. So thanks once again, and any questions, happy to take it forward. And thank you all for the support given to the IA chapter. And any question, this is on recording, so any questions on this can be happily taken. Any recordings you can go through, and we're looking forward to more sessions and a very interactive session. Thanks once again. Thanks Aniket and Karthik, and thanks Arunan for supporting. Have a safe evening and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Karthik.
Thanks, Raman. Thanks, Raman.
Yeah.
Thank you.